Hello, my friends. This is Deepak, and it's a great privilege for me today to actually have a conversation with Ethan Brown, who created Beyond Meat. And we are going to talk all about it. But before we do that, Ethan, I'm always curious, and so is my audience. Um, what led you to create Beyond Meat? And I just want to know, did you grow up eating meat, or what's the backstory?
Well, thank you. And before I would be remiss to not just comment on how special it is for me to be on this segment with you. I have known of your work for a very long time, and as a young person in my 20s, I remember reading your book, and I think it was one of the first ones, because I just picked it off of the shelf in my stepmother's library, and she's a leadership coach, and so had literature like this, and yeah, it just made an impression on me. And so I've been a fan ever since. And our chance greeting recently and was, I think, meant to be. And I'm very pleased to be here. And so, as I think about how to describe this, it really is around when I was first in graduate school. I went to go visit my father in his office, who is a professor. He's now at McGill, but at the time he was in Maryland. And I said, I really want to take a break from school. I'm not sure what I want to do. And he said, well, let me help you think about this. And I started talking to him, and he asked me sort of what I thought the greatest problem in the world was. And I gave that a very literal interpretation, and began to think about climate as the answer. And so I answered climate, and then we talked about how I could organize my career around trying to solve or contribute anyway to a solution there. And so I stayed in school and came out and began working on energy issues around alternative energy and ultimately on fuel cells, on proton exchange membrane fuel cells from a business side. And I was doing that because I felt this urgency around climate, and would go to these conferences where we talk about spending billions of dollars on lithium-ion batteries or solar cells or pick your favorite energy technology. And yet everyone would gather around lunch or dinner that was primarily meat-centric. And so as I learned more about the emissions profile of livestock, I began to think that maybe a really big part of the solution was right under our noses at the center of our plate. And so I began to look into that. And it really appealed to me because I had an early interest in animals as a child. I wanted to be a veterinarian. I spent a lot of time on our family's farm, which is back behind me. I grew up in the city, but we spent a lot of time going out to this farm. We had Holstein cattle there for a milk operation. And so I just loved animals, and I loved being around them. And so I was always thinking about them. And so this brought a convergence of my own personal passion with my professional work. And so I began to think about how I could apply the same model that I'd seen in energy, where you take the very best scientists and the best engineers, you give them a very clear problem, which in this case is to build a piece of meat directly from plants. You get them funding, and then you kind of get out of their way. And you see that time and time again in the energy sector. No one had done it in food yet. And so I think the thing that I was able to do, which has given us the kind of head start that we have, is to borrow that model from energy and bring it into the food sector, and been very fortunate to work with great people along the way. But that's the story of how I got into this.
So I've been looking at all your background, and it's very clear that Beyond Meat has a mission and also a brand commitment. Can you say a little bit about that?
Yeah. I have never seen anything at all in my career, and I still haven't today, where by focusing on one thing, which in our case is the protein at the center of the plate, and making this effort to construct that completely from plants, that has a impact on four things simultaneously. And so whether it's human health and the association between high levels of animal protein consumption and things like heart disease and diabetes and cancer, or the greenhouse impact that we just discussed, or natural resources where the amount of land, energy, and water is so significant that's being used by livestock. Or lastly, animal welfare. And this is an area I think that you and I have talked about before. There's 70 billion animals are being raised and slaughtered every year. And so if you look at the biomass of mammals on Earth today, about 60% now of total mammalian biomass is simply livestock. 36% is human. Only 4% is the rest of life on Earth. It's incredible what's happening. So we're taking this beautiful biodiversity that we've been given, and we're reducing it to 4 or 5 species, ourselves and chicken, cows, pigs, and whatever else in the livestock. So it's an opportunity to try to make a contribution towards stopping that. And I think that the real shift for me was when I was able to stop thinking about meat in terms of it having to come from a chicken, cow, or pig, but instead thinking about its composition. And when I started thinking about its composition, it became very clear that it's a recognizable material. It's essentially amino acids, it's lipids, it's trace minerals, it's vitamins, and it's water. It's exactly what's in your body, it's what's in mine. And what's so neat about this is that and you know all of this, but for the listeners, if you look at the origin of material on Earth, if you look at the supernova events that happened and the hydrogen and carbon and nitrogen, et cetera, it's all coming from a common place. And then the organization of that material into the building blocks of life is occurring through DNA, whether in plants or animals, right? So you have the same materials and you have the same kind of operating system building those materials. And so if you look at things like, take an example, if you look at a leaf and you look at a feather, they both share the same basic construct. It's called bilateral symmetry, right? Where they're the same on both sides, right? And so there's so much in the plant kingdom that is the same or similar to what's in the animal kingdom. And our job is to find those core parts of meat, whether it's the amino acids, the lipids, trace minerals, et cetera, directly in plants. And instead of feeding those plants to the animal, run those through our system of heating, cooling, and pressure to create the architecture of meat. So it's entirely possible. It's not fake meat. It's not something that's artificial. It's simply taking those core parts of meat, the amino acids, lipids, running them through a system that creates that architecture of meat and skipping the animal.
So let me put that very simply. If genes are the words that become the flesh, and the DNA is the alphabet, A, T, C, G, or whatever, and what you're doing is editing basically the manuscript for life.
Yeah.
The same words, the same alphabet is in a plant as in an animal. All you're doing is doing a little bit of editing. Is that a good summary?
Yeah, I mean, you said it much more clearly than I did, which is, again, one of the reasons that you do what you do. Yes, I mean, what we're doing is we're just taking, instead of running that same material through the animal, we're simply taking it right from the plant. And there's this beautiful commonality of life that makes that possible. It's the shared story of life, the origin of life all the way through this tremendous explosion of different species, plants and animals share this common material and common system of design.
So my friends, to summarize what Ethan has just said, the alphabet of life is common to everything from bacteria to plants to rodents to animals to primates to humans. The alphabet is common. And the genes are basically rearrangement of the alphabet. So 65% of our genes are the same as a banana, and 80% of your genes are the same as a mouse. And actually 99% approximately are the same as a primate, and 65-75% same as a fruit fly. So now you get what Ethan is saying. So,
Deepak, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
What you just said about the rodent, I think, is so interesting. And there's these moments in life that you have where things are revealed to you. You get that moment where you can peel away from the wall of the cave and actually see what's really happening behind you. And I had a moment like that, I don't know, 15, 20 years ago, maybe. Anyway, I was at our farmhouse, and a mouse sadly had crawled into one of the dog dishes in our kitchen and had died. And I picked the mouse out, and because the fur had been was wet, it didn't obscure the paw anymore. So I was able to see the two paws of the mouse, and it shocked me because I was looking at hands, and I just couldn't get that image out of my mind. And so I've become fascinated by this question of after 1859 and the origin of species and Darwin, are we thinking about our place in the world properly, right? And are we organizing society in a way that reflects the actual position that we hold within a broader community of life? And that's why I'm so interested in the Jains and that line of thought.
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a long time, Ethan. And while I'm a big fan of Darwin, random mutations and natural selection is only part of the story. I think evolution is guided by consciousness. Otherwise, you wouldn't have this unity of life across species. But that's a whole different story. I know now that you're the leading plant-based meat movement around the world. Is that true?
Yeah, so we have the number one brand in terms of product sales in our category in retail, the number one product in 4 of the top 6, and then in food service as well. And we have these 2 really exciting partnerships on the food service side as well as others. But the ones that we have these formal agreements with are McDonald's, and then the Yum Corporation, which is KFC, Pizza Hut, and Taco Bell. And so for me, that's very special because it's an opportunity to work globally with these very large companies to try to create a transition where people still go and eat what they love, but they have something that is plant-based versus having been run through an animal. And so, taking that position, we're looking to try to do 3 things. We're continuing to improve the taste of our products. So we call this FAT, so flavor, aroma, appearance, and texture. Continue to make advances in each of those areas. We are continuing to communicate the health benefits. I think we mentioned we have a strong program at Stanford. That's a 5-year program, and the first results that came back is a clinical trial, a clinical study. Was published in a peer-reviewed journal. We had people consume animal protein 3 times a day for 8 weeks. They have a washout period, and then consumed Beyond Meat 3 times a day for 8 weeks. And we just measured their cholesterol, and we measured their TMAO levels, and both were statistically and clinically reduced during the course of the Beyond Meat diet. And so we want to keep communicating that health message and making our products healthier. And then third is drop the cost of our products below that of animal protein. So get it to taste just like animal protein, clearly communicate the health benefits, and then drop the price below animal protein. We can do that in concert with these large global corporations. We think we can make a serious dent in the consumption of animal protein globally.
I was looking at some of your research, and you actually did mention it in passing: the taste, the accessibility, the price, and the nutritional benefit. And I would suggest people who want to know more about it, look at Swap Meat Study, Stanford University. And you just mentioned the conclusions of that study, right?
Yes, yeah.
So what is the plant-based diet initiative fund right now?
So that is something that is an ongoing effort with Stanford Medical to do follow-on studies. I think we need to create a database of information that is peer-reviewed, that demonstrates the health benefits of plant-based meat. There's a lot of understanding around the benefits of plant-based eating, right? All the way back from Diet for a Small Planet to Dr. Spock. I mean, all these things have been really old, good ideas that have been around for a very long time. Of course, in the East, much longer. But plant-based meat is a new thing, right? And so we need to make sure that people are really comfortable consuming it. No one in the world, I think, has eaten more Beyond Meat than myself and my children. So I'm extremely careful about what goes in it, and want to create a database where people can go and look and say, hey, here are the results.
You mentioned partnerships with McDonald's, KFC. What is the partnership with Yumi Brands? Who are they? And now I see PepsiCo also.
That's a
I
good.
have had a relationship with PepsiCo, past Frito-Lay, etc., and they were looking for sustainable food and very interested in climate change as well.
Yeah, they've been great to work with, and that's what I want to say about each of these partners that that they've leaned in, and this is each citizen has a responsibility, each consumer has a responsibility to make changes in their own lives, right? And if we're going to reach this satisfactory conclusion with climate, and then you have leaders at these companies that are trying to make products like ours available, and so I'm very eager to work with them. And the Pepsi partnership, we call it the Planet Partnership, is a really strong one, and it's going to lead to in 2022 a really good distribution of products across the United States that will allow people to have affordable and convenient protein in places like the 7-Elevens of the world and CVS's and all these places where you would buy animal protein in a snack form. So it's exciting, and Pepsi's leaned in and they've been great.
And
I just walked by the research. So we have a bunch of research centers. I'm in the research center that they use, and just looking at these young people working on these projects. It is I can't wait for you to come down here and see all this. Like you would love it.
You have some other recent innovations too. The newest Beyond Burger and chicken tenders in food service and retail as well.
Yeah, I'm very blessed to have a terrific team that. And this is something I think that you'll resonate with you. We've recruited a lot of people from the medical community, people that were at Caltech or pick your favorite university, who were thinking about going in to treat cancer or heart disease or what have you, a lot of protein chemists and things like that. And we said, come join us and let's try to stop these things from happening, right? And let's think about prevention. And so, we have this very bright group of people. We have over 200 scientists, engineers. They understand this really, really well. And we tasked them with understand meat better than anyone in the world and then rebuild it from plants. And they're using all this sophisticated medical imaging equipment that's out there. The number of things that they are creating is to me, it's super exciting. And in the last 18 months, we've commercialized 12 different products globally. I don't think there's any other company in our space that commercializes faster than we do.
So Ethan, with all this information, I want to tell you about a project we have right now. Where I am is the headquarters of the Chopra Foundation. And right here, we have the University of Central Florida, the medical school, the VA hospital, KPMG, US Tennis Association, and Disney Imagineering is moving here as well. This is a community, Lake Nona, founded by Joe Lewis, and it has a medical city. And the focus here is longevity, health, and well-being, and research in all those areas. And it's a very collaborative place. I recently obtained my license to practice medicine in Florida, in the state of Florida, and joined the faculty of University of Central Florida Medical School as a full professor, and actually went through the whole process of getting recertified in internal medicine, endocrinology, and metabolism, which is my specialty. And we are launching very soon, probably in January, something called the Longevity Project. And I'll just tell you the inspiration behind that, because as you know, I come from Eastern wisdom traditions, but I'm also very interested in bridging Eastern and Western ideas about health, the future of well-being, and longevity. So the tradition I come from says that even in the age of darkness, which is what we are in now, all that's happening, climate change, and destruction of the ecosystem, extinction of species. You just mentioned, only 4 sources of biomass in the world, coming from all the havoc being created by the manufactured, refined, processed meat, basically, and high sugar and all of that. In our philosophical system, normal health span should be over 100, number one. Number two, you shouldn't have any disease, chronic. And number three, you choose your death through Mahasamadhi, or the big meditation. Now, while this may seem totally outrageous to the world, I come from a tradition where I've seen examples in monks and rishis and my own teachers where they did do what I said, live beyond 100 in the absence of disease, and when they took their final exit, their exit strategy was in meditation. So that was the inspiration for the longevity project. Now, what we've done here, we are recruiting medical researchers, University of Central Florida, but also our other contacts at Ivy League medical schools. But we're also bringing the Ayurvedic lifestyle, which includes everything from yoga to breathing techniques, to mind-body correlation, to vagal stimulation, which is now showing to be the real counterpart to sympathetic overdrive. And we're going to be looking at everything from that you mentioned, telomerase levels, telomere levels, but we're also looking at inflammatory markers and also looking at the microbiome. Now, one very interesting thing that I discovered as we were looking at all this microbiome is that if you go under the surface of the earth, say in the Amazon or some rainforest, in 1 teaspoon of soil, there is more genetic biodiversity than the entire surface of the planet. So there are genes there under the soil that the animals that came from those genes might be extinct, but the genes are still there. Okay, so once we resurrect not only the human microbiome, but the planetary microbiome, huge implications for climate change, but also huge implications for the human biosphere, which is our body, which is the same as the biosphere that we call the world. I mean, we have such a distorted idea when we start saying there's me and there's the environment, when in fact those trees are our lungs. If they didn't breathe, we wouldn't breathe. And if we didn't breathe, the trees won't breathe. Put an animal in a vacuum, it dies. Put a plant in a vacuum, it dies. Put them both together, they both live. So, I'm in my mind trying to change the vocabulary. There's no environment. You have a personal body, you have a universal body. Trees are your lungs, oceans and rivers are your circulation. The earth is recycling as your body. The air is your breath, even though we try and cut it up. This is my space, this is your space, this is my river, this is your river. Now we have even, we are cutting up space. This is international space, this is so-and-so space. It's the divided mind. So part of my effort in this longevity experiment is not only to actually extend human lifespan, and like you, very passionate about, climate change being behind everything, including the mutations we're seeing with COVID-19. Ultimately, all these vaccines are going to be amazing, but that's not the solution. The solution is restoration of the ecosystem. So given that, we are recruiting everybody. And in recent last few months, I've engaged with 2 people from Canada, actually. And one of them is a quantum biologist, and the other is, like myself, an endocrinologist, internist, specialist in metabolism. They work together, and what they're telling me is that at the most fundamental level of existence, the arrow of time is not an arrow, it's bidirectional. And we just haven't understood what negative entropy is. So entropy is aging and death and everything else, but negative entropy is life. And it's evolution, and they go together. So one of the things we are trying to do with this help of these biologists is actually see how we can minimize entropy. And one of the things I'm personally fascinated with is if we got the same metabolic experience in this state of consciousness, the waking state of consciousness, that we got in deep sleep. In other words, I'm going about my business, but my biology is reflecting the expression of what is deep sleep, because in Vedanta, deep sleep is least entropy. and then dreams, little bit of entropy. And this waking state, of course, we have all these plans, we have rushing deadlines, maximum entropy. But if we could maximize evolution, negative entropy, that would be a key. So doing that, we are trying to get partnerships with everyone, so that, we're looking at skin products that use stem cells, that stimulate stem cells in the skin. We're looking at other things that actually bring about rejuvenation in the body, including, how do we ultimately resurrect the entire microbiome and the genetic information on the planet. And we would be honored, and we can have this conversation later, but if we could have Beyond Meat as our official protein in this great experiment, which is called the longevity experiment.
Dr. Deepak, you had me at a low. I would absolutely 100% want to do that. And as I mentioned at the very beginning of this, I think it was Timeless Mind, Ageless Body. I can't remember. I think I first read. I first read, and then 7 Laws. And so I'm just an enormous fan of yours. As I think I've mentioned to you, I sort of thought about the second phase of my life and the framework that you laid out in that book. So, and I think these things are interesting, and I'm actually doing some of them myself. The piece actually broke recently, but I would use it up until then. Vagal nerve stimulation in my ear.
Auricular stimulation. Yeah, we're looking at that too, by the way.
Yeah.
We're going to use that as one of our products.
I just find it so interesting. And then the other is the work that you did with Dr. Tanzi. I use those glasses sometimes, yes. which I think are just fascinating. So I am 100% on board, and I think this distinction between self and world is one that we need to try to erode as quickly as we can.
Heal the divided mind.
Yeah.
So I'm very grateful for this conversation. Any last words?
Just appreciation for everything you're doing and the role that you play in the world, and very eager to support what you're doing and come visit, and also to welcome you here to our labs.
Thank you. Thank you, Ethan.
Thank you.
It's a privilege to talk to you.